Hey everybody, this is Matthew Soltesiak and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast. Using my sportscasting background, I speak with a variety of guests and interview key players to gain more insight on what makes this team go. As the Detroit Lions enter a new gritty era, we'll look beyond just the kneecaps when it comes to the analysis. Welcome to another episode. In this episode, we preview the Detroit Lions Week 16 matchup with the Minnesota Vikings. And there's a lot more on the line now this week as Detroit hits the road to Minnesota. A win by the Lions would result in their first division championship since 1993 and the first time ever for the NFC North. In this episode, we'll hear from a reporter who follows the Vikings regularly. Then we'll get to the rest of the Detroit Lions preview. Let's get to it, Lions fans.
Hi, this is Billy Sims, and you listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast.
In this episode, we preview the Detroit Lions Week 16 matchup with the Minnesota Vikings, and there's a lot more on the line this week, folks. We're going to first hear from someone who covers the Vikings regularly. I'm joined by Jack Wallace. He's a weekend sports anchor for the NBC and CBS affiliate KVLY TV Valley News. He covers the Vikings regularly in Minnesota Viking country. Jack, thanks for joining the show today.
Of course, happy to be here again. I know it's been a minute, given the fact that it's strangely the last 3 weeks of the season squeezing in both these games, but good to get them in just right as we wrap up the year.
Yeah, we talked about that before the season even started. What a weird scheduling, whatever it was. I know they wanted division meaningful games late, and they're going to get one in this very next week, but it seems strange scheduling two teams that play each other twice so close next to each other. Well, Jack, the Vikings have had a very strange journey this year. The last time we spoke, I think they're kind of right where you thought they were going to be. I just don't think they've gotten to where they are, how you thought they would. I mean, they started the season 1-4, then they reeled off 5 straight wins, and most recently, they have lost 3 out of 4 games, and all of those games have been decided by 3 points or less. And within that storyline of those wins, you got to look at the quarterback situation. They had pulled up to 500 before Kirk Cousins went down, and it felt like the Vikings were getting to be real dangerous right at that point. And then Josh Dobbs comes in, and you've got Jaron Hall and Nick Mullins, and they've all had their own flavors and influences. So I guess, tell me, where does the quarterback situation stand right now with the Vikings?
Well, it was a funny day for Nick Mullins, who's been a long-time backup quarterback, at least primarily backup. Of course, Josh Dobbs getting moved down to, I think, almost emergency status at this point, because I know that Jaron Hall, the new rookie from BYU, has been on and off with injury, hasn't really done anything this year, mostly because of either not needing him or mainly because even when they could have needed him, he's been injured. But, I mean, Nick Mullins overall played a pretty decent game. I mean, over 300 yards passing, a pretty high completion percentage, did have 2 interceptions, but 2 touchdowns with that. And of course, Ty Chandler on the ground with a phenomenal day, 132 yards. We haven't seen that out of a Minnesota running back in a minute.
So Jack, the quarterback position has been in flux, and there's no doubt there has been a big drop off from Cousins, and that's caused the team to make some adjustments. Now, Alexander Mattison was given the keys to the job, and he's averaged about 4 yards a carry. But you brought it up. Ty Chandler emerged with some solid numbers in this most recent game. And so do you think the ground game is something the Vikings are going to try to use more for the rest of the season?
I think they really could, because I think Madison kind of pulled a Joshua Kelly in the sense of a very good running back in a very specific role of being a good kind of backup emergency, can be good in short situations. But when you just say, go do it, it didn't really work out too well. Kelly hasn't really looked too good in LA. Madison hadn't really looked too efficient in Minnesota. And giving a younger guy like Ty Chandler really saying, okay, you go. And yes, part of that was due to injury. It's been impressive to see what he's been able to do and what the O-line has been able to give him as well, because they've been giving him a lot of help. It has been good to see that for his sake. I obviously the game was a little bit different with Josh Dobbs being a much more mobile quarterback that's going to run it a lot. So it is a little bit different with Ty now having a little bit more room to go. But I think they really could see it a lot. I know that, of course, as you know very fully well, it's a pretty scary front seven with those Detroit Lions that they're going to face into these next 3 games. And running against them is going to be a pretty tall task. all three of these final games to make a playoff push that Minnesota is very much still in the running for, especially with 2 games against the top seeded Detroit Lions. It's they're going to have to really get moving, especially on that side of it, given the fact that Mullins, as well as he did play and to give him the credit for it, that's going to be tough to trust him to pull off numbers like that, and the defense helping more the next 3 weeks in a row.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, and that also means you're going to probably push yourself to rely on what might be the strength of your offense, which has to be the ball catchers. I mean, Jordan Addison. Well, we can bring up Justin Jefferson first off because he's the name everybody knows. He's been hurt. That's been a big hit, but he is back. Rookie Jordan Addison seems to be playing a pivotal role for the Vikings this year. I mean, he is the second leading receiver on the team. I mean, to get that type of production out of a rookie has to really help you feel good about the depth of your receiving core. And then TJ Hawkinson just set a career high for receptions in a season by hitting the 91 mark. He's got over 900 yards receiving and 5 touchdowns. Oh, and by the way, you still have KJ Osborne, who now can maybe function more as a number 3 receiver. Tell me a little bit about what you're seeing out of the receiving core and what role you see them playing in the success going forward.
I think one of the most impressive parts of the receiving core overall has been the diversity that they've been able to handle with Jefferson being out for so long. Because, of course, that was the biggest question when he went out of, you have the guy that you just go to all the time. How's that going to be to kind of mix it up? And the biggest key to that really to me, which is TJ Hawkinson, who, of course, the former Lion has been a guy that, I mean, while technically not a wide receiver, of course, in the receiver core, and has been one of the best tight ends of the entire season. And then, of course, if you're Detroit, you're sitting there doing fine because you have Sam Laporta, who's been a massive rookie. And so you have a game with 2 great tight ends, and especially for Minnesota, you have that option. But for Addison to give him such a big role and then to expand that to even larger when you have him essentially replacing Adam Thielen's spot, that's sort of a tough spot to be in. And I think that it's been very impressive seeing Addison do what he's been able to do and seeing how he's been able to be so quick, how he's been able to break tackles very well. Especially that long touchdown he had in the game in Cincinnati was very impressive, just snatching the ball almost an inch off the grass and getting his way in for 6, almost 30 yards out. So it's been impressive, and they're going to have to put up big numbers against a Detroit team that I think can be vulnerable in their secondary. Of course, their defensive strength is more in the line with guys like Hutchinson, but they're going to have to get a lot through the air, and it's going to be, I think, a lot more, which is, not a super hot take, but seeing more how Mullins can react to that and work with his tools, admittedly good tools, and seeing how he can sort of handle that these weeks in a row.
All right, well, let's switch over to the defensive side of the ball then. The Vikings defense, I've got to admit, I think they've been better than advertised. I think they've done better than I expected them to coming in, considering it seemed like there were more departures and additions this offseason. They're around top 5 with rushing defense and right around top 15 in passing defense for yards. And, the overarching theme from the outside seems like Brian Flores has had some hands in the defensive side and been the key here. Has he been the key, and or what other elements are really should Lions fans be aware of?
I really think he has. And if you look at, I'm checking out the schedule right now. They have not allowed more than 28 points at home all season, and they haven't allowed more than 20 points at home in a win or a loss all the way back near the start of the year. And that was the game against the Chiefs, which pretty tough to blame them having more than 20 points allowed against the Chiefs. So they're a team that has really, really, really gotten down a lot more on giving up points, giving up big plays, a lot of problems. That was the reason why they fell in the games that they did fall in last year. Of course, Minnesota was phenomenal in 1-score games, but when they lost, it was like the Cowboys game where it would be just a massive blowout disaster. They've really been able to lock that down a lot more. And it's one of those years that, of course, the year's not over. You're still in the playoff race. It's not done. But it's one of the biggest what could have been years in a while for Minnesota, where you have a defense that's really a lot more together. You've had good running back performances now. You've had Addison play well and fill in the spot of Thielen leaving very well. And you're just killing it missing Kirk Cousins. And and give Dobbs credit for getting the wins against Atlanta and New Orleans, which are still mind-blowing that he pulled those off. And Mullins for riding the ship when he could and, getting the win like the Raiders win, as silly as it was. They're still keeping afloat in the race when by all means they shouldn't be. And so it is still impressive for them to get in and do this. But for them to knock off the Lions once, I mean, twice, I think is very hopeful thinking, but to do it even once is going to be very difficult. And that's why this weekend kind of is the biggest of them all. I mean, because if Minnesota is able to take the next two games and, sweep out at home where they play pretty well at home, especially the last few weeks, if they're able to get those two in and have set up a meeting with the Lions, that'd be massive. Or you could lose both and then you're just playing massive spoiler. It's sort of in between, but it's exciting to kind of see how the year could end out.
Yeah, the Lions and Vikings that we've talked about, they're going to face each other twice in the next 3 weeks. But with the Minnesota loss on Saturday and the Lions win, that means this December 24th game has added importance immediately. And that is, if the Lions win, they win the NFC North. Now, the Vikings, whether they win the NFC North or not, are, like you said, they're in the playoff hunt regardless. So every win, every game does matter. There's only 3 left for them. If the Vikings are going to win this game against the Lions, what does Minnesota need to do?
I mean, it might sound cliche, but they got to control the line of scrimmage as best they can. That's the bread and butter of what the Lions have been able to do in a lot of their wins and a lot of their dominance this season. But if they can shut down a lot of the Lions' rushing attack and funnel them a lot through the air and be able to get in runs themselves and be able to control both their own D-line and their own O-line, I think that can be a really big key to turning this game. If Minnesota really wants to be able to pull off what will be a big-time upset, they need to be able to get those big plays in, because playing at home is big and advantageous, especially for the Vikings. They played very well at home the last few years. It is difficult for teams to go in there and win. And most of the time when teams do it, it's one score. It's going to be tight no matter what. It's been well over a year since someone has gone into US Bank and beaten this team by any more than 7. So I do believe it'll be close no matter what, even if Minnesota's a little off. But that line of scrimmage thing has to be the focal point of this team to really be able to stifle an excellent D-line.
All right, well, it is the NFL. And so really whatever happens last week doesn't really matter next week. And you said, it'd be a big upset for the Vikings, but you've already said the Vikings have a pretty good home field advantage. And they held the Raiders to 0 points. And then the following week, the Raiders put up 63 points. So I don't think anybody is going to take the Vikings for granted. I mean, we saw the Lions lose to the Bears and lose to the Packers. So if the Lions are going to win this game on the road, what does Detroit need to do to make that happen?
The biggest thing they need to do to make sure they can get the game separated early is to do what no one's been able to really do there, and to put up a lot of points quickly on Minnesota and create that separation to put them behind the 8 ball early and ahead. Because if you have to all force it to Mullins and say, you now go win the game when you're down against that good defense, and if it's down big, that's a really tall thing to ask, especially after last week. And you have guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown. You have guys like Sam Laporta. You have guys like Jamison Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs. If they can really get those big plays through the air and really establish a lot of dominance like Jared Goff did this week, if he can really get on that again, like we've seen him do a lot, that can get that early separation to sort of put Minnesota away, a team that tends to stick around late, that can tend to hold leads and kind of cut into it. But for a team like Minnesota to really come back in a big way, that's been a tough thing for them to do and hasn't really happened a lot this year.
Jack, before we get out of here, anything else Lions fans should know about the Vikings coming into this game that you think is kind of pertinent?
Biggest thing to know about them is that Minnesota loves blitzes. They love sending guys in. They love establishing a lot of pressure of that early. And so if Detroit really wants to be able to get that big scoring early and get going early, the O-line's got to be extra watching out. The pass rush has to really be watching, because Minnesota is going to really gun for that. And so with guys like that in that middle of the field, a little more opened up with the linebackers coming in, I could see guys like Sam Laporta continuing his big play if he gets some, routes over the middle, get some more plays with a little bit, I don't want to say dump offs, but just a little bit easier passes that aren't necessarily just sort of chunk plays. I think that Minnesota is going to be very aggressive towards Detroit and going to try to get out early like they were able to do against Cincinnati. They've been able to do a lot of these games, is get this early lead, as they've done a lot this year. And so I see them trying to establish that early by sort of getting out in front as they've been able to do. So I think that that's a big thing to watch out for. That's a very Brian Flores thing that he's done with this defense this year. And for the most part has worked well, mostly. And we'll see how they do against a Detroit team that has a lot of weapons to them.
Awesome. Everybody, that's Jack Wallace, weekend sports anchor for the NBC and CBS affiliate KVLY TV, Valley News Live. Jack, thanks again for joining the show. It's always a pleasure to talk football, NFC North stuff with you.
Of course, great. I'm happy to be here, and I hope I can catch you again for the last week of the year, which I assume, at least I'm figuring, is going to have pretty massive playoff implications, even more than this week. So it'll be exciting.
It will be. Yeah. We 1 week at a time, as the coaches say, and we'll see how things play out from there. But thanks again for joining the show.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you.
And now to the rest of the preview. We discussed the recalibration of the Detroit Lions as they prepare for their matchup with the Minnesota Vikings and what it will take for a Detroit Lions victory.
This is Corey Schlesinger, and you are listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast.
I'm joined by Coach Jerry Angers, named Michigan High School Coach of the Year, as well as Coach of the Week by the Detroit Lions. He's also mentored numerous players at the college level and some all the way to the NFL. As usual, it's good to have you here, Coach.
As usual, love being here. Talk about the Lions every day.
And as we continue, just another reminder to the listeners, please hit that subscribe or that like button. Tell your friends about us. It's helping us recalibrate, if you will, our momentum. Now, Coach, let's talk about this recalibrating word I bring up. And I say it somewhat, in a laughable way because, well, so many people have been crying that the sky is falling around these Lions recently before this Denver Bronco game. And now some of that has slowed and the hype is starting to build again. Now, yes, it's true. The Lions offense has been inconsistent in recent games, putting the defense in some bad situations. The defense hasn't been perfect, and turnovers have been a big issue. So I hear that part. But as excitement pops back up again after this win over Denver, and a lot of people's opinions are now changing after that win, Coach, I know your opinion today is the same it was a week ago and the same it was 2 weeks ago. So tell the listeners, what is it that you see in this team that hasn't had you up and down like a roller coaster fair weather fan?
Well, I think the victories that we've had when we played bad or the losses and things like that, things that we just continue to bounce back from. We haven't put together 2 losses in a row, knock on wood. We lose, we win. We win, we lose. I mean, we go back and forth. We got the best record we've had in years starting out. We've run the table since that 8-2 start last year. And so, and just the bodies and the personnel that we have drafted and how they have turned out when the negativity has arisen, yet the Lions keep pushing it. And that's all we have to go with.
So during this game, we just saw a big difference in that Denver game, the most recent game the Lions played. And turnovers were probably a big factor because that's something Campbell has harped on quite a bit. Mm-hmm. But there was a lot of pressure by that defense. Is there anything you saw that you could credit as a difference in what we saw?
Well, I think that's a big thing on that is the pressure that we had, the people making plays. Pascal from, the Kentucky boy, 3-year captain, the guy that we drafted that nobody knew about, made a big play. Kamensky makes a big play. In and out. Our safety, I'm not going to try to pronounce his name.
Ifeatu Melifonwu.
Ifeatu Melifonwu, thank you. The plays that he's made, our corners stepping up in different situations, and the defensive line, linebackers making plays when other people aren't around or aren't, we without Anzalone a couple of weeks ago, Campbell stepping up again, letting the process, work its thing, letting the young guys learning from the older guys do what they do best. It's a learning process. It's guys with, 1, 2, 3 years, 4 years in the league starting to make plays and not making mistakes twice in a row. You've heard Campbell say that, they make a mistake, they learn from it, move on. We make a mistake, we learn from it, move on. That's what we as fans need to do, whether it's a win or a loss. Bask in the glory that they're having and enjoy what's going on daily with this team.
Those are some great points. And I think, again, we kind of go back to the offense not having those turnovers has prevented the defense from getting into bad situations, which has then made things more difficult. And people have been criticizing Aaron Glenn for quite a bit. I know you're a big proponent, a big defender of Glenn. I think this game was perfect in the fact that we saw they're not just resting on their laurels. That's something I think we said in the last show. And they're trying different things. We saw adjustments in the secondary. We saw a different safety plan. We saw 2 different guys getting reps at defensive back. And so trying different things and not having those turnovers really help make the difference because, as we've talked about for a while, if the Lions cannot start out in a hole, then it doesn't throw the playbook out and it doesn't force you to change from what you want to do on offense. And we know that's run the ball.
Oh, for sure. And, you look into that, touching base on the defensive side real quick, going back to the offense. But, like you said, he's doing packages right now. Anzalone's a pretty good cover linebacker, but I'm seeing Anzalone go on the sidelines and Maven coming in, and I think that's the thing is we're turning the possession arrow in our favor. And I think that's what's helping our offense, which gives us the opportunity to run the football and do what we do best, staying on schedule, staying ahead of the chains and not getting the situation, oh my God, we're down 2 touchdowns. We have to throw the ball more because we have to catch up. And I think that's one of the things you're starting to see. You saw that in the Denver game. Hopefully that carries over into the Minnesota game.
Well, and the offense getting things right, again, takes the pressure off the defense. And I want to back up a minute to the draft. I know it seems like forever ago, but we have to do that because we have 2 rookies. Well, we have multiple rookies from this year's draft playing big roles, but there's 2 guys who really stuck out in this most recent game. Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta, early picks at positions a lot of people questioned. And I loved it because Dan Campbell brought this up without even being asked about it.
I'm just going to bring it back to Brad Holmes. It's a hell of a job by him once again. Took a lot of criticism for those 2 picks, but they look like they're okay. So I'm glad we got them.
They're okay? I mean, I love that by Campbell. I mean, you and I were both fans of these picks from the beginning, even when criticism was being flung left and right. And I even said multiple places, this draft is going to age well. And some people are like, drafts don't age. This is just the way they are. But can you remind the listeners why and tell them, why we like this and tell them what it is you saw out of these players this year?
Well, I think the big thing is Campbell and Brad Holmes are drafting guys that fit into our system. And I think that's the biggest thing is they're fitting into our system. They're going to do what we need to do on offense. They're going to do what we need to do on defense, and they're going to grow. They're young. They're individuals that are got great work ethics. That's the one thing that Dan Campbell had said the other day. If you can find guys like Ragnar who had knee surgery and is back 2 weeks later, you would have a great job to be able to discover who these guys are. And that's what Brad Holmes and the Lions are discovering. They're discovering guys that are going to fit into our system. They're discovering guys that are going to play within the team concept. They're guys that don't care, what their stats look like, but how they can make the Detroit Lions a better team. That's what they're finding with these guys. We have to leave it alone and trust the process, trust what these guys are coming up with in and day out. And that's what these guys are doing. They're filling a role that's going to make this a great team. They're filling a role that is going to make this a great team. And how their numbers stack up, well, we know how they're stacking up right now, offensively and defensively. So trust the process, trust the guys that are in command, the guys that are watching the film work, and the guys that are making the picks. And it seems to be working pretty well right now, knock on wood.
Well, and I understand the second guessing from people if you look at the history of the franchise and decisions that have been made and outcomes that have happened. But, and I've said from the beginning, I understand there's a positional value and people say you don't take a running back this early. I say, sure, but look at a team that has a great running game and how much that changes everything. Plus, Sam Laporta has literally rewritten Detroit Lions history books, and he's threatening to rewrite the NFL history books for a rookie tight end. This has been great return on value very quickly for these guys. And these guys are different makers in this offense, and they're a big part of the reason the Lions are where they are. Now, Coach, it's a long season. Every season's long, especially one more game now. So I got to believe it's natural for a team to have ups and downs through a season. I know Campbell says you want to just constantly climb a little bit. But with the ups and downs, I'm wondering, could the Lions actually benefit from this down, if you will? I'm going to call it a down. They went 2-2 in 4 games, but it brought the division a little bit closer. It's got fans rechecking things, but from a team concept, from a coach concept or perspective, Does the fact that you're just not dominating straight through and you've got some losses you didn't expect and you have to come back, does that help your team, or is that not really a big factor?
That's a huge factor. We talked about that a few weeks ago about losses, how important losses are, how much you learn from a loss. It's the same thing when you play a close game. It's the same thing when you get dominated in a game and you feel you're going to the game that you're going to win. It's all a learning curve, especially for the younger guys. Again, we talked about it, whether you're in the college level, the high school level, the pro level, you're going to learn from those mistakes. You're going to learn from those things that aren't hunky-dory. I did pull a lot of hunky-dory, things that are just perfect. And it also is going to help you when you get into the playoffs. When things go bad, you can say, hey, remember how we changed that? Remember how we had the same concern, week 14. And we had the same mistake week 14. And I think those are things that you learn from it. Everybody's going to learn. It's all about we're going to go back. It's all about the process. It's all about us being able to distinguish between the good and the bad. And it's always, hey, we've had this bad before. Let's not have it again. And that's what you're seeing from these guys. We're getting better offensively. We're getting better defensively, and we're getting some guys back. So I think those are all things. And we went through a stretch that we were 2-2 in. And again, we win. And if we lose, we win again. And let's see if we can string some of those W's together.
Well, you and I have talked about what is an area that is often unsung on many football teams, but does get a little talk from the Detroit Lions, and that's our offensive line. And I think if you were to look at the overall picture, and I know, you and I were texting about some of this, and we've got some eye-popping stats here, but the Lions go as the offensive line goes for the Detroit Lions. I think we've seen enough games to know that if the offensive line is getting the job done, everything else is there, and it talks about the health. And so we've got some major stats to throw out. Did you want to talk about some of these first, or do you want to just talk about the grit and the hard work of all these offensive linemen?
Well, I think the offensive linemen, we mentioned Ragnar a little bit. Let's go back. Trust, whether you're the quarterback or the running back or a wide receiver, you always have trust in the person that's in front of you. You always have trust as a quarterback and the receiver running the routes. How many times do we hear that? And when you start missing bodies in situation on the offensive line, the trust factor falls a little bit because it's not your guy. And I think you're right about that. I think, and those eye-popping stats, you can rip them off. Was it 4 games, 5 games, what we've done, which, do you have those in front of you? It'd be great if you talked about those right now, Matt.
Yeah, I've got them. Will Birchfield from 97 won the ticket, put this together. And with these 5 offensive linemen, the starters, the Lions are 5-0 with this group on the field. They average 38.4 points a game with this group. That's an average of 421 yards a game, 179.4 rushing yards per game, 5.5 yards a carry, and Jared Goff has a passer rating of 121.7 when this group is there. That is just incredible, and that just goes to show how important Ragnow, Decker, Jackson, Glasgow, and Sewell all are for the entire team.
Oh, for sure. And you look at that, and again, that's that trust factor. That's that feeling confident factor. It's not that they don't trust the backups, but it's when you have your guys, when your boys, your dudes, your men that you're fighting with every day in a huddle, every day in practice, it makes a huge difference. And then you add Laporta to his blocking schemes. Matt, I watched the film the other day, Matt, about the different things they're doing with him. The play that sticks out to me is the one where he sat in his stance, didn't move the other day. The linebacker had no idea what he was doing. And then Goff rolls out of the pocket a little bit, and Laporta sets the edge so Goff can get out there to make a pass play. Those are just time and time again, being in the trenches with each other, knowing that guy has your back is second to none. I mean, it's just incredible about those guys when they're together.
It is. And, when those guys are together, I think that plays a role in the turnover situation. And the Lions, they're 6-0 when Goff doesn't have a turnover. And we saw a long stretch last year where he didn't have one. So we know it can be done. It can happen. And right now, Goff, again, There are people that are just critics of Goff, and they're going to be no matter what he does. But he is third in passing yards in the league, and he's tied for third for most touchdown passes in the league. And so he's got some great stats. There are some other quarterbacks with big names who have more interceptions than Goff. I know he's had some turnovers, but my point is he's a pretty darn good quarterback. When the solid offensive line is there, that helps that much more. And it doesn't just help Goff. It helps Goff because it will set up the play action run. Because we got to talk about these running backs. The Detroit Lions are on the verge of doing something ridiculous. They could have 2 running backs with 1,000 yards rushing this year in the same season. And I mean, any Lions fan who's been a Lions fan for more than a hot minute knows the Lions have had like 2 1,000-yard rushers in the last 20 years. I think it was 2013 with Reggie Bush. Jamal Williams was last year. And before that, it was James Stewart back in 2002. There was a streak forever where the Lions didn't even have a 100-yard rusher in a game. And we're looking at possibly 2 1,000-yard rushers on the same team in the same season. I think the Carolina Panthers did it back in 2009. This is game-changing for this offense and defense.
Oh, for sure. Again, if we can run the ball, that takes away the clock. That helps us with possessions. There's just a ton of things off that running concept, and then it turns our play action pass into unstoppable with the receivers that we have and the tight end, of course. And so those are big things. Again, what are you going to do as a defensive coordinator when they line up and you're looking and going, oh, Gibbs is in the backfield. Oh, Monty's in the backfield. Oh, they're going to throw. Oh, we don't know what they're going to do. And I think that is just huge for us, knowing that no matter which back, and that goes back to the trust factor again, Matt, we just talked about. Jared Goff lines up under center, and he doesn't care which back is behind him because he knows whichever one it is, he's going to get the job done. He's going to run the right play action pass. He's going to pick up the block. I mean, they're both getting into blocking schemes. They can both pass block. Monty was the better one at the beginning of the year. Now Gibbs is starting to fall into that place and back and forth. So from a defense coordinator standpoint, there's no tendencies. And from an offensive standpoint, we don't care who's back there.
It was great to see them get moving in that second quarter against Denver and how much they were able to continue that flow. We had not seen that in a while. The Lions have 19 wins so far between last year and this year, and still got 3 games left. And that is the most wins the Lions have ever had in a 2-year span, which is pretty incredible because they've had some 12-win seasons in the past, but they would follow that up with like a 6-win season, or it would be preceded by like a 5-win season. So that right there is eye-popping, but then it's also encouraging. And knowing the state of our team, we're a young team that is on the rise. That is exciting. That gives you optimism. And so that's a big storyline coming out. And we've talked so much about the guys, Laporta, Monty, Gibbs, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. We haven't brought his name up. As we know, he is the offensive wide receiver everybody wants to stop and shut down. But Campbell was just reminding everybody about Josh Reynolds. When I was at the game, I was talking to these guys in front of me, and we're like, yeah, Josh Reynolds is an unsung hero. That guy just works. He does his job. He's on a track to have a career season. And you got Jamison Williams, who is just looking better by the week. The offense is trending up, not just because of this one game, but because what we're seeing out of all these players.
And again, that comes back to the personnel, and we have all our number ones, with the offensive line. Again, you can touch base on that, but it's keep trending up. Who are you going to stop? Choose your poison on who you're going to try to double or whatever, and you can't. There's nowhere to do that. And I mean, look at Peoples-Jones had a big catch the other day. These are just things that continue, right? These are things that you continue to look at. And are you going to double? You're going to double St. Brown? Okay, then we'll hit Laporte underneath. You're gonna. Oh my God, here comes JMO across, and he had a great catch the other day. Again, you go back that and then pick your poison, because we can run 2 running backs in the backfield and put one out at wide receiver. 49ers do it with Debo and McCaffrey all the time. And so, again, St. Brown's lined up in the backfield. Laporta's lined up in the backfield. Who's not? So, going back and forth, I totally agree. We are trending upward, and we will continue to trend upward because each one of these guys can and play numerous positions and line up in numerous spots in the offense, and people have to try to figure out how to stop that.
And the other thing that's really exciting also is the style of play of Laporta and Gibbs. That Denver game, the moves Laporta showed on the sideline to shake the dude around. Gibbs with his run, I mean, the only thing that tackled him was him losing his balance and falling down and sitting on his butt. And then Jamison Williams, I don't know how he stayed in bounds and got around that defender. So that is just so exciting to see the abilities, the agilities, the determination of these guys yards after catch as well, or yards after the first few lines of scrimmage. So, Coach, big game. Seattle, they defeated Philadelphia. A little bit of a surprise right there. Let's talk a little bit about the playoff scenarios before we get into what we expect going into the Vikings game. We know if the Lions win, they are in. If they beat Minnesota, they win the division. The other situation is if Seattle or the Rams lose a game, the Lions are also in. They're in as a playoff team if Seattle or Rams lose. If they win against Minnesota, they win the division. So that's kind of where we're at right there. People want to talk about seeding, and I still think we're a week or two too early for that. There's a lot of variables. They're technically like 1% chance of getting that number 1 seed. I'm not even focused on that. The 3 seed's okay. The 2 seed would be amazing because a lot of people wonder what's the difference between the 2 and the 3. That would be if you get the 2, that means you play a lower a lower ranked team, a lower seed in the first round of the playoffs. And if you win, you get a second game at home. That's why that number 2 seed would be pretty nice. Again, we're talking from a fan perspective. We're not looking from the coach perspective because the coaches are 1 week at a time. All they're focused on is beating Minnesota and winning the division. But those are the playoff scenarios. And I guess we'll wait to see talk about who they might play until after they actually clinch a playoff spot. Is there anything you wanted to add about playoff scenarios or playoff updates?
Well, I think a couple things you think about. We want to talk fan-wise. We want to talk coaching-wise, right? We don't want to back into the playoffs. We want to make sure that we drive into the playoffs. And let's talk about a fan perspective, man. I think you and I are going to the last game of the year against the Minnesota Vikings. Oh, my God, how awesome would it be to be at that game and the Lions win, they clinch the division. We don't want that. Okay, let's go back into a fan perspective again. Let's go as a child or as an adult. Every Christmas Eve day, we have always asked, can we open a present early? Can we open a present early? Whether we're an adult or whether we're a child. Well, you know what? The Lions can give us an early Christmas present. Beat the Vikings. Win the division. Take care of the little things. The big things will take care of themselves. We want to get into the playoffs. We want to win the division. Win the division. That gets us into the playoffs. Win the division on Christmas Eve. That takes care of our heart and our thing about, oh, my God, I just want this great Christmas present on Christmas Eve. Come on, Lions. As a fan for all these years, Matt, you and I want that victory on Christmas Eve, and let's open that early Christmas present.
That would be about the best early Christmas present, and that would be one, the best one the Lions would have ever given fans on Christmas Eve, as far as I can remember in recent memory. And so in order to get that done, the Lions are traveling to Minnesota. They have a shot to win the division, win that game. They're in the playoffs by winning the division. Be the first time since 1993 they're a division winner. It would be the first time they've ever won the NFC North. And here's Dan Campbell talking about that task.
Yeah, look, man, this is about to be a tough environment. Going on the road at Minnesota, they got an outstanding defense. They've changed a couple of things up offensively just watching crossover tape. So this is not going to be easy. Defending North champs from last year, but man, we wouldn't have it any other way. Go out there on the road, tough environment, man, and we got a chance to get the next one. So, man, we're going to be looking forward to it. I know I am, and I know our guys will.
So, Coach, the Vikings have had an up and down season. They've been all over the place. Talk about a team that's had adversity to go through, and they keep coming through the other side. It's not perfect, but they don't give up, and they're a pretty darn good home team. So, as Campbell said, it's going to be a tough environment. He says the Lions wouldn't want it any other way. This is pretty amazing. So what are some of your keys to the game, or what do you think the Lions are going to do in going into this game?
Well, a couple things. Let's talk defensive a little bit. They got they're on to their fourth quarterback. Okay, so that's a big thing. They have some pretty good receivers over there. He's the nice thing with Mullins is, he had a pretty good game the other day. I think he had 303 yards passing. His completion rate pretty good. He did have 2 turnovers. I think those are things that we're going to try to get after. The good thing is he's not a scrambler. Good thing is he's a pocket passer. And so that's going to help our defense, keeping him in the pocket and hopefully forcing him to create some more of those bad turnovers that he has and keep it out of those other guys' hands. I think that's one of the things. Our offense against their defense, they got a pretty good defense. Hunter has 15 and a half sacks.
Wow.
Yeah, 15 and a half sacks. Flores is just a great D coordinator. I was listening to some things on him. He teaches that, play within the scheme. Don't get too high, don't get too low, but play together as a unit. So I think that's another thing that we have to get to. If they have a bad play that goes against their defense, where an offense makes a big play, they wash it, push it away, get away with it, and move on to the next play. So we're going to have to try to string some great offensive plays together so that bad play just keeps coming back into their mind going, oh, my God, the Lions just went for 8. Oh, my God, the Lions just got a first down. Oh, my God, the Lions just got another first down. Oh, my God, the Lions just scored. And we want to put that doubt in their minds that it's just going to continue. And after that going on and on for a quarter or 2 quarters or 3 quarters, then the doubt is in your mind. There's no way we can win this game. So we have to put the doubt in the mind of the quarterbacks. Mullins has had that he can't throw the ball against us and he can't sit in the pocket. And we have to string a bunch of plays together and hopefully keep Hunter away from adding to that sack total.
I agree. The offensive line providing Jared Goff the protection, the time, keeping our running game going, because it goes back to what you talked about and what we've talked about for a while is one of the best friends of this team is winning time of possession, because then the defense doesn't get overexposed. I am hoping the defense will keep up the pressure that we saw last week, and you talked about it with Mullins being the type of quarterback that he is, that should play into our favor, but want to get that running game going. And so that's going to be big for us to win the game, I think, is the running game and getting points up, because then, again, if we get points early, that's going to help the Lions control the narrative, as you said, and that's going to affect the way the Vikings can play the game. Now, Coach, got some roster moves to talk about. We've got some things that are happening, some that we're expecting soon, one that's happening right now. So things we're looking at is the Lions have got some reinforcements coming back, right? CD Deuce is going to be coming back, formerly known as CJ Gardner-Johnson. Jason Kabinda, those are some guys. Hendon Hooker is the guy that the Lions are looking to activate. We know those guys are coming back. So it'll be interesting to see when they're available and what's going to happen with them. We do have one thing that is a known thing, and that is Hendon Hooker is being activated. And in order to do that, the Lions released or cut Riley Patterson. And so probably not something we saw coming 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, but after missing those extra points, Mike Badgley got elevated. I think the Lions liked the consistency. They saw him all of last year. Again, I was a little surprised the way things went with Patterson. I thought it would work out a little bit better. I still feel very comfortable with Badgley. He's got a little bit stronger leg as well. And they're elevating Hendon Hooker because they want to work with the guy. Can you talk to, the listeners from a coach's perspective? There's only 4 weeks left. Why elevate Hooker? He's probably not seeing the field, but I think there's some really valuable time here.
Well, yeah, he's, they definitely want to work with him. You want to, he has to sit all year, but these are valuable times, especially with him being able to run a scout team, especially with him being able to get in within our offense. It's, again, we talked about this earlier, and that's taking these younger guys and teaching them, the right techniques and the offense and the defense and things like that. So you want to get him into that situation. There won't be any pressure cooker situations for him because he won't be getting ready for games, but there'll be pressure cooker situations for him to get in practice. And that's only going to carry over into the next year with Goff and his contract. And of course, Teddy will be retiring. We have already read that Teddy will be retiring after this year. And I think he wants to go and coach high school football. God bless him on that one.
Maybe we should have Teddy call you up and get some insights on what it takes.
Yeah, I would love to. I'll definitely sit down and talk with him about that. That would be a lot of fun on that, man. So I think those are situations that you're looking at, and that's only going to benefit the team in the future, no matter what we're going to do with the quarterback situation.
I agree. It's one of those things where this is 4 or 5 weeks where, like you said, you can be doing more in practice. They can work with him. It's a time for him to grow before the offseason so that when he comes back, the team comes back next spring, he's further along than he would have been otherwise. And so it makes a lot of sense. And you don't need to keep 2 kickers. I mean, teams just don't do that. Again, people are probably a little surprised by the changes, but it is what it is. And we're riding with Badgley. And like Camel said, they've been evaluating and battling it out for weeks behind the scenes. And this is where the Lions are comfortable going. Coach, we got a big game here this week. It's on Christmas Eve. We're looking for that Christmas present. Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
I think you're right. I think it's let's drive into the playoffs. Let's drive into winning that crown, and let's go on the road and do it in a hostile environment. And man, I wish I was there.
Oh, as do I. And I love that. Drive into it, don't back into it. And that's what we want to do with the playoffs. That Denver game may have been our get right game. Let's see if this can continue. On the road is never an easy place to win. I'm looking forward to Sunday and Christmas Eve and seeing what the Lions can do. Coach, thanks for joining us as always.
All right, Matt. Thanks for sharing your time with me. I appreciate it.
And have a Merry Christmas.
You also. And to all the Lions fans out there, go Lions.
For sure. Thank you so much for tuning in, folks. You can find all the episodes at notthesameoldlions.com. If you're listening on YouTube, please hit that like button. While you're at it, tell your friends about the show. Please subscribe regardless of your listening platform. And until next time, stay gritty, my friends.